Welcome to all of you. Afghanistan today, of course, is a victim of so many things. Also the fact that there are so many conflicts and crises around the globe that absorb our attention. We have to stay with Afghanistan. We have to remain engaged. And in order to remain engaged, we have to remain informed. And that's why Norwegian Pen has invited today a star journalist, as it says on the board outside, a star journalist. And he is really a star. I've known him almost since he started his work in what is still ToloNews, which then in 2010 became the first 24/7 news channel in Afghanistan, and a very successful endeavor, I must say. And then in 2021, things did not go the way we all wanted. And Lotfullah moved out of the country. He lives in Toronto, works in Washington and wherever, you know. And I heard about his itinerary over the next few days. I was impressed. This is a man on the move. So he has started now Amu TV, which broadcasts into Afghanistan. I receive the short news brief every day, and I can assure you that it is a very, very professional effort that is being made, and hopefully one that reaches many Afghans. You'll be able to explain what you do and what you do in addition to the news, etc. I think that would be interesting. And also, I must mention that, of course, every Afghan politician of certain stature who has not been interviewed by Lotfullah Najafizada feels ashamed, of course, feel that he is not of real class. For instance, the first, or the only presidential debate, I think, that took place in 2019 was moderated by Lotfullah. He has received a number of awards. He received an award from Reporters Without Borders for the Press Freedom Hero Award. He has also been interviewed and profiled in Forbes magazine and many others. And then you may say, how old is this man really? Well, he's only 35, so started very young. I think I would stop here and invite you, Lotfullah, to come and take the floor and give us your views of today's Afghanistan, perhaps not only within journalism, but also in a broader scope. And let me say that this is, of course, an event that is co-sponsored by 3 organizations: Norwegian Afghanistan Committee, where Liv Kjølseth, Secretary General, is here, Norwegian Pen, and then also the Norwegian Journalists Union. So we are 3 on this, and we're very happy to be able to have this cooperation, of course, which is important to assemble those who still have an eye on Afghanistan. Lotfullah, the floor is yours. And the glass of water is untouched.
It's more than half full.
It's more than half full.
Guy, thank you so much. It's, I think you're Afghan first, Norwegian second. We have to debate that. They say that people who come to Afghanistan from abroad, they either fall in love with the country or they really hate it. So there are some people who just come and then never return. But then there are other group of friends of Afghanistan who, despite many attempts, fail to forget about Afghanistan. So it really touches your heart. And we have some of those examples today in the first row. And Kai, what you have done for the country, particularly during those very defining moments, the country, the Afghans are indebted to you. And personally, as a friend, I'm very honored to know you and have been in touch with you over the years. And thank you, Elizabeth and Norwegian Pen for organizing today's talk. And I'm so happy to be here. For those of you who don't know, some parts of our family moved to Norway maybe 20 years ago, 25 years ago. So we have a bit of a family connection as well. So always a privilege and an honor to be back. Afghanistan is an emotional topic. We try to turn it into sometimes, as a journalist, try to put your emotions aside, but it's really, really difficult. So I was asked to talk about media as well as topics beyond media. And let me start with media. That's where I come from. I think with the 2001 international intervention in Afghanistan, I was a teenager, and we felt that the country was liberated. This was a very genuine sense of freedom in our heart. And over time, this generation of Afghans grew up with this new phenomena, that the time and the era that you cannot gossip about politics over dining table because somebody might be related to the Communist Political Bureau or working for this fraction or that group is over. That was and is a new Afghanistan. Fast forward to 20 years later, which I'll definitely talk about how politics failed us. The country transformed. I want us to remember that. I want us to be reminded that there are things that is impossible to be reversed. So one is the social transformation. So we talk about a country with 2/3 of the population under the age of 25. We talk about a country that 10 million kids went to school. We talk about a country that life expectancy went up by 1/3. We talk about a country that its girls' robotics team won international awards. We talk about a country that its music school's orchestra team played at international stages, from Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. to Opera House in Sydney, and represented a new Afghanistan. That Afghanistan's image at global stage is not only defined by the falling Twin Towers of New York. So it was the new generation, the young people of Afghanistan who did, despite all the odds, despite so many failures on so many other fronts, to portray a different picture of Afghanistan for the world. And in this larger success story of the country, I would say the mini success was the development of media. One thing that was common throughout the history of my country, from monarchy to communism to civil war to no government to Taliban, was that people were shut. You were silenced. That was the common denominator of all these very contradictory political systems in the course of decades of Afghanistan's contemporary history. So people felt free. The reason I insist on this particular word is that you only appreciate freedom when you achieve it after being silenced for decades. And that means a lot. So media gave the wings to the people to fly. And in my country, at some point, we were producing 200 hours of often very heated political discussions in every 24 hours in the country. That is something. One Afghan politician once told me that one of the reasons that we did not have a revolution in 2 decades in Afghanistan was because media was giving enough space to people to express their frustrations and anger. And that is right. Only in the channel that I used to work for, we were providing a platform for 1,000 people every month to come on our political programs. I'm not talking about the entertainment side. I'm not talking about the music shows. I'm not talking about so many other platforms that media provided. And this is just one station. So this empowered people. This introduced a new culture. Unfortunately, with the return of the Taliban, things changed. From an industry of about 10,000 plus people, you have lost, I would say, around 2,000 journalists, minus me, the cream of the crop of the industry. And they have left the country, creating an enormous brain drain, an enormous loss in human capacity in the country. And people realized that all of a sudden the content has changed. The Taliban's view towards media is different. We were often blamed for being very pro-Taliban, giving Taliban a lot of space, talking to them all the time. We were criticized from people left and right. And when the Taliban returned to power, we were their first target. In the evening of August 15, 2021, I received a call from the Taliban. And then they instructed me to control the situation, quote unquote, and help bring normalcy. And I realized that things have really changed. That was unprecedented in the way I was dealing with politicians, with people in the government. That was the first ever direction that I had received. And that was the beginning of a very profound change. The Taliban have since then have done the following to media. 1, if you're a woman and work for a news station, there should be a black curtain in the newsroom. So the women work in one side, men on the other. If you're a woman, you have to cover your face. If you're a woman, you can't interview a man. If you're a woman, you can't touch upon certain topics. If you're a man or a woman, you can't talk about protests. If you're a man or woman, you can't talk about security incidents. You can't interview certain individuals, particularly those Afghans who are overseas. If you're a woman, an Afghan woman in Norway, in Oslo, and you want to be on an Afghan channel in Kabul, you have to cover your face and put a headscarf. Basically, the Taliban are imposing their code of conduct, their regulations not only on our colleagues in Afghanistan, but on the people who deal with them, even overseas. So that is pretty tragic, I would say. Then we were left with the fundamental question, which probably defines us for the rest of our life. And that was, well, America decided to leave, NATO decided to leave, an era come to an end, democracy ended. Was it really made for us? Was the country ever ready? Does it really belong to Afghanistan? Does it still matter? It was that liberated generation of Afghans who were challenged who were profoundly challenged by this question, that were you as a generation a proxy of an ideology, a project, or you were the core? I believed that we were and we are a reality. And as a result of that, we said, well, politics let us down, things changed, but we have to continue what defines us. As dozens of journalists, my immediate colleagues, were scattered around the world while filing asylum papers, lining up for driving licenses, still in refugee camps, we started working on an idea to create a platform so they can come back and continue what they know best, continue to do what really belongs to them. And as a result of that, we created a TV channel called Amu TV, based in Washington, D.C., that employs about 50 plus journalists and content producers, I think over 20 plus cities around the world in different time zones, working with a vast network of journalists throughout the country. So we can consume content, we can get content out of the country, process it, give it back to the people who own it. By this processing channel or chain, we are bypassing Taliban censorship. Even that at a great cost. Those of us who are from Afghanistan, we know that satellite TV is one of the most common medium for people to watch television because of the lack of infrastructure, because of the very rigid terrain of Afghanistan. People turn into satellite TV for watching TV. Similar to a country that we skipped landline telephone system. When cell phones came to Afghanistan, there were hardly any infrastructure for landline phones. So thanks to this opportunity, satellite television is providing us as journalists to directly communicate with the Afghan people. And with the thousands of journalists who are still in the country who believe that this is what should be done, we're often reminded that this is basically helping them. This is basically giving them a voice. I was told that we had received over 500 resumes in just over a week. I wish we can provide opportunities for all of them. But this is a sad story and at the same time a good story. It's a sad story because thousands of journalists are out of jobs. It's a good story because the Afghans believe in what really means for them and what really defines them. Our relationship with the Taliban is difficult. Last time I was in Oslo in January 2022, we interacted with them. We talked with them. Also in Doha several times. Our conclusion is that for them, media is a state profession. If you are in the media sector, you have to follow the state communication lines. And it is very, very difficult for journalists to convince the Taliban that independent actors also belong to a society. Independent actors are also a reality of a society. They are using violence, intimidations, and harassments. The UN has said that over 200 journalists have been detained, tortured, harassed, arrested, beaten by the Taliban in the past 2 years. I think the number is much higher, but let's agree with the UN that that is still a very considerable number. On the World Press Freedom Index, we were 128 in 2021. We jumped to 158 the next year. A massive decline. And we have to fight that. We have to try to protect what we have built. We are on a mission to preserve our gains. And that is, unfortunately, very, very difficult. But let's not forget that Afghanistan was no paradise even before the Taliban takeover. Although we were one of the freest countries for journalists, for media, for free press, but we were also one of the deadliest countries for journalists. Over 100 journalists have lost their lives from 2001 to 2021. Afghan journalists, many international correspondents as well. So that is about media. I'm happy to explain more, but I was also asked to talk a little bit about the political situation and what next. I believe the Taliban have failed to provide a vision, the Taliban vision, that can guarantee their survival for long. It is almost like an operation that their visibility is just 1 meter. They can't really see what's going to happen to the country in weeks and months and years. And that is because they have really failed to transform from an insurgent group into a political group. It is difficult. I'm hearing that they are hardly communicating between certain groups of the Taliban. And you know that they come from different parts of the country, and then they have different loyalties, regional loyalties, ethnic loyalties, tribal loyalties, and that is affecting their ability to produce some sort of a long-term vision. And that is very, very dangerous for the country. And the Taliban's relationship with the people is at minimum. There are no platforms where they receive and interact with individuals, with communities, with civil society or others in the country. And there is a very, very strong and speedy process of what I call Kandaharization of politics and democracy, politics and bureaucracy in the country, that every single decision has to be made down in Kandahar. Not only the appointments of, let's say, a district chief, a police chief at a district level, but also business decisions, other appointments, procurement decisions are all made in Kandahar. And that is further, I would say, trying to re-engineer the whole political culture and governance culture in the country, which is, I think, again, endangering a future political accommodation in Afghanistan. Survival for the Taliban is everything. That's what they care the most about. For them, it's really, really important to stay together at all costs. Experts debate whether they have the quality to stay together and survive. Well, time will tell. But there has been tensions within the group, as well as it's in their entirety with other regional actors. Pakistan, for those of you who follow the news there, in June, July, August, and even in September, there is an attack almost every other day related to the TTP. And they attack directly the Pakistani army. And that really challenged Taliban's sort of regional ability to maneuver and to build relationship. There has been constant border clashes with Iran, with Central Asia, and their regional diplomacy, despite some successes, I would say, on the economic front, has been deeply, deeply troublesome. There is a unanimous, I would say, understanding in the region as well as in the West that because of a lack of an alternative, a status quo is your best option. A status quo is to maintain the current arrangements in the country that is not becoming an extra headache, an extra burden on the shoulders of the international community. Our friends in Washington, in other capitals, here in Germany, in London, they ask some valid questions. They say, well, you Afghans, tell us what really works. Bombing, we tried it. Money, we tried it. Isolation and abandonment, we tried it. Excessive engagement, we tried it. So what else as an option is out there for us to give it a chance? And that is a difficult question, of course. The Afghans, the non-Taliban Afghans or the anti-Taliban Afghans are also unfortunately divided across so many groups and camps, from people who believe in constructive engagement, in passive engagement, to those who endorse armed resistance. And this lack of consensus within the non-Taliban groups, I think, is contributing to the fact that the international community failed to come up with an Afghanistan policy. So my conclusion in terms of Taliban's relationship with the West and the region is that the strategy is to have no strategy. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. I think that is sort of a very dominant consensus in Western capitals as well as in regional capitals. That's probably the only thing that Washington and Tehran, agree upon, or Washington or Beijing, or even Washington or Moscow. That let us leave Afghanistan the way it is. So this is a question for, I think, the people of Afghanistan, whether in the diaspora or those who are inside the country, to really think. In concluding remarks, I would like to say a few things. One, look, I think one of the reasons that led us to the current situation is because of a deep sense of lack of ownership by the Afghans themselves. We had to rely on the international community for everything. And we could see that on a daily basis. And lack of leadership. No neighbor is going to come and build your house. You have to put your house in order. We forgot that. We thought that was not our job. We thought that was, America is going to bring democracy for us. NATO is going to feed us forever. The region, has to deal with us no matter what. I think that is a profound lesson as Afghans that we have to take note and be reminded every day. That, yes, we have so many reasons to blame others. What are the areas that we can draw lessons for ourselves as Afghans? I think the lack of leadership and the lack of ownership are the fundamental reasons for where we are as a nation. And please, no more quick fixes. Quick fixes, we have a saying in Farsi for it, right? That you can't cross the water by walking over mud. So you will be drowned. And that is not a permanent bridge. And I think I see so many interests that there has to be another bond. Foreign ministers should come together. Let's bring everybody around the table, hug each other, and then have a new beginning, a new bond process. I don't think the country is ready for it. Someone told me that the Taliban should be given the time to fail. Well, they should be given the time to reflect. But in the same time, the other Afghans should be given the time to reflect as well. So we as Afghans should come up with a solution for our country. And that has to be the foundation of international engagement. I don't think that experts in Western capitals, including here in Norway, that plays an important role, particularly when it comes to Taliban engagement, has to come up with policies and prescriptions for what will define not only the future of us, but also the generations to come. So with that, I would probably close my remarks, and I'm happy to engage in Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you very much for. Isn't he going to sit in the middle?
No, please.
I mean, we never agree. We never.
How to set?
Well, this is important, It's important. Diplomacy is built on seating and seating arrangements and how rooms are shaped. But thank you very much.
Sitting in the wrong chair?
According to her, you are sitting in the right place. According to me, but I don't mean anything. Now we will end this discussion now. You will be joined on the stage by Liv Kjølseth, Secretary General of the Norwegian Afghanistan Committee, and Elisabeth Eide, who is the chair of the Afghanistan Committee of Norwegian PEN. Elisabeth Eide, who always claims that we are not related. I don't know why she's claiming that all the time, because I'm not quite sure, but we have. But anyhow, please take your seats. And
Let's
then
make a DNA test then.
we will have to do that. Please. And then I leave to you to keep the discussion going.
We will,
And
to our best ability.
opening of course for the audience.
Thank you. The reason I wanted it like this is that I don't want to wag my head in all directions. Simple as that. Thank you very much for your introduction. That was very interesting and good to listen to. Can I just, as a very small anecdote, say that 20 years ago, when I was sitting in a guest house in Kabul, I met with a young American man. He was visiting there. And we always, when foreigners come to Afghanistan and we meet each other, we ask, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? You know. And I, of course, asked him, what are you doing here? And he was fresh from law school in the United States and he said, I am writing the Constitution of Afghanistan. And I say this because you said something about quick fixes and about who should decide the future of Afghanistan. So I was a bit amazed by that meeting with this person. But the first question, I think we should zoom the opposite way now. We start with the general situation, and Liv and I will ask some questions, and then we will take questions on journalism, and then we will open for the audience. We have plenty of time. My first question would be about the Taliban vision, actually, because according to what I read, they have the vision sort of ignited by the first 2-3 generations of the Prophet. I mean, after the Prophet, very much inspired by the Wahhabi direction of Saudi Arabia. But, well, perhaps that's not a political vision, though.
I'm not even sure if that is very articulate and it's crystal clear that what does it mean in practical terms for daily governance? Because you have your own interpretations about, the first days of the lives of the Prophet. So that is certainly, I think, a big question. There are books written, let's say, one by the current Chief Justice of the Taliban, that is seen as some sort of a de facto manifest of the Taliban. But there is, Afghanistan is in a legal crisis. It's a country with no laws, no constitution, no media law, it's someone making decisions and issuing edicts and decrees, and some of them are verbal. So by vision, I mean that there is sort of no process presented by the Taliban on how they will, let's say, Afghanistan under the Taliban for the next 20 years. What does it really mean? Where are we going to be in 20 years? Right? What is the development vision? What is the economic vision? Where is the political vision? What happens to inclusivity? There are talks, of course, there are opinions, but I don't think that Taliban as a brand, as an entity, as a company, as a group, I don't think they have really come up, with that doctrine.
I think I would tend to agree. Just one more question, and Liv, please, you can go on after that. We talked this today, earlier on, about the role of Iran as a neighboring country with a large shared boundary. And I was thinking of the model they have in Iran, where the sort of religious political leadership sits in Qom, and then you have the executive power in Tehran. Is this a similar model where you have Kandahar, Kabul? Is there an inspiration there?
I think Khamenei is in Tehran mostly, but yes, I think in Iran, there's a lot of similarities between the Islamic the Islamic Republic of Iran and the Taliban's government, but I would say there are areas that they also cooperate and learn from each other. But religiously, there are also deep ideological differences, which will, over time, will define the relationship of Iran with the Taliban. But for now, it looks like a marriage of convenience for the two, particularly on how to deal with women. You know, the very brutal edicts on women, on the way they would like to sort of censor and suppress half of the society. You know, some of it is basically a Sunni version of what we see in Iran.
Yeah. First, thank you so much for a very interesting introduction. And I particularly noticed also what we're now discussing actually about whether they do have a plan and what Taliban actually wants to achieve. And I think what we actually see more and more, and they might not have a clear end destination, but we see more and more signs of their intention to really change the Afghan society. And that is, of course, what we see in terms of their vision of women and women's role in the society. But also we see it and experience it when it comes to the education sector. And the efforts that they are now making to change, actually, and this is of deep, deep, deep concern, to change the thinking of every Afghan from the very beginning of childhood. And this is really disturbing, and it also shows that they put a lot of effort into this kind of a fundamental change of the society. Right. And of course they have, from the very beginning, seen all journalists, everyone that potentially could criticize them, as someone that needs to control, and somehow civil society actors, particularly human rights defenders and others, have been taken under control. And now we also see how they are really making new regulations, also controlling international organizations. Because we are also seen as a part of that Western project that they are very, very much against. So to limit everyone that is against the society, what society they want, I think it's not that clear to get the picture of, and we are maybe not asking them enough, but that it is something that is really taking Afghanistan back to something that I guess none of us actually, that will be very contradictory to what the Afghanistan that most of us love.
Or Afghanistan is, actually.
Or what Afghanistan is. And I completely agree with you that all the changes over the last 20 years and probably longer, all the extremely qualified, the young generation, right, that represents this change that you hope it's not possible to break. But I think that they are trying.
I think the social engineering that you're referring to is definitely an attempt, which someone might argue that this is a sort of a thinking of one individual in Kandahar, or I'm really sickened to hear from experts and sometimes diplomats that all Talibans don't agree that girls are the girls shouldn't be banned from going to school. But does it really matter as long as they don't go to school? That who really believes in it or who doesn't? The truth is that the decision made in Kandahar is implemented by those who may not agree, but they implement it. Those who are in Kabul. So, and then the madrasa, I think, education. They have approved 100,000 positions for jihadi madrasa instructors and teachers. that is another sign of what you're suggesting. That over time, I think the social or the societal request, pressure, resistance will fade away. So that might be an attempt for a long-term project, a long-term a dream of the Taliban. But I don't think that it will really work. I don't think that that is. I see no study even now that puts Taliban's approval rating more than 15%.
Can I ask a question about what is often iterated in Western countries about the presumed contradictions, political contradictions between the Kandaharis and the Kabulis? Are they exaggerated? Is it a naive assumption?
I think, there are differences between individuals, right?
Yeah.
There are differences between the three of us on this stage, the way we think, and probably everyone in the room. But the question is, what's being implemented under the Taliban's name? I think that is, how we should. That's what the conclusion we should come about. We have heard several times in different meetings that Taliban in Kabul might think differently, but as I said earlier, fearing disunity and fearing some sort of an internal implosion, is driving them to really stick together at the cost of 3 million teenage girls not going to school, and that is a huge, huge price that we're paying for it. So yes, there might be differences in ideas, but not in implementation.
Just to follow up, when it comes to the vision of Afghanistan, because I've lived in this world longer than you, and I remember from the Mujahideen side in the 1980s in Peshawar, we met with many of them, some of us in this audience too, and for some of them, they were different too, right? But some of them would say, well, it's not only about getting the Soviets out of Afghanistan, this is a global jihad, we want to follow them across the border and so on and so forth. Is there a continuum here between those extreme Mujahid people of the 80s, 90s, and what we see with the Taliban today?
Well, there is tradition does play a role. There is an underlying sort of, tribal views in the country that can be, cross-ethnic. That is a reality of the country. But the Taliban is taking the whole game at a different level. And that is unprecedented. Not to defend anyone else, but this level, I would say, of policing and interference in daily life has been quite unprecedented.
Should we move to more towards the situation of women? Would you like to address that?
I just want to comment on one thing, because I know that you are talking about the Kandaharis versus the Kabulis. But I think it's important also to look at the 34 provinces and all the districts also around the country. And from our work, working in now 14 provinces, we have experienced quite a lot of flexibility and different approaches at the provincial and district level. With up till now, I would say, or up till for a few months ago, at least it was a lot of schools, a lot of districts that where Taliban commanders and the district authorities kept the schools open, for instance. But what we are seeing is that the Kandaharis, they are trying to because they know that there is this flexibility or pragmatic approaches more at the district and provincial level, and they are aiming to also take control over that. And so what I would be wondering about, thinking about the history of Afghans and the kind of never really been one a country with one rule in the entire country, with all the authorities around in the districts, and I'm not able to explain completely, but whether also the Taliban and the people will accept to live under one rule, or whether they are actually trying to trying to not give any acceptance to local deals and the authority of the local leaders. That will actually cause some problems over time, even though, of course, unity seemed to be so far the most important.
I think that we have lived together as people of Afghanistan in the current geographic boundaries for over 200 years. And we have been tested over and over, and the country has not partitioned. So whenever you talk about unity in Afghanistan, let's remember that how many times you have to be tested against all the odds and challenges to prove your unity and ability of coexistence. I think that resilience of the Afghan people is often overlooked. Second, the differences and diversity, I think, is very common. Every society in the world is very diverse, and the Afghans are diverse. The problem with the Taliban is that they are not diverse. They do not represent the diversity of the country. And I think that is the core of the issue. We're not saying why the Taliban exist. Every country has a radical political party or a conservative political party. I mean, that happens in Europe, that happens in other countries. Fair enough. But there are also other realities that cannot be dominated, particularly suppressed by force. So I think the political system is what is further promoting a lack of unity in the country. I strongly believe that the distribution of power based on ethnicity is challenging Afghanistan's ability to unite over and over again. I think the simple look of, okay, you have these power brokers, you have these ethnic groups, and these are the price tags on them, and this is how you distribute power, that is unfair. I don't think that really represents particularly the values of the generation that I talked about. So we tested elections 2004, 2009, 2014, 2019. The formula, the 50+1 formula, the winner-take-all formula, did not produce a stability. I don't think this is really people's problem. You know, we have to revisit a political systems formula that represents Afghanistan's diversity and produces stability. I don't think that, when I say no quick fixes, this is exactly what I mean. That one has to really study the problem to the core and then present ideas. I strongly disagree, and I'm frustrated with the ideas of people who say that, look, this is Afghanistan, this is how people are, and this is how you are, and Taliban are your representative. Well, I mean, you have so many Afghans in this room, right? I don't think that they can really speak for any of us.
You're actually perhaps attacking a certain brand of cultural relativism, which is also political relativism, perhaps?
Well, I mean, the Taliban are, I think, culturally relevant and politically relevant. As a reality, we can. I'm speaking against a winner-take-all formula, and in the spirit of that idea, I can't ignore the Taliban as a reality on the table either.
I wanted to ask you one question about how did it happen? I mean, we were all perhaps a bit astonished on the 15th of August 2 years ago, a little bit more than 2 years ago now. But you have, in your speech, addressed it to a certain extent. But and I'm not looking for a particular blame game, but how would you explain that it could happen so easily? I mean, we know the US withdrew and they did it too rapidly, but there was no foundation for defending then what had been achieved for the 20 years of freedom that you talked about. Well, how did that happen so rapidly?
Because everything was built around the U.S. presence. A U.S. contractor had to sign for every rocket that was used in fighter helicopters. So the Afghan army needed fuel to authorization from U.S. contractors. You know, the entire, I think, setup, when I talked about ownership and leadership, this is what I meant, precisely that this was taken by from Afghans, or Afghans never tried to take it themselves. So when the Americans pulled out, there was actually no system in place. And the army collapsed, and the president fled before the Taliban were in Kabul.
There is one president left, though, the former president, and we hear that his movements are highly restricted, as with other former political figures. But is there any hope in those? Why do these people stay? Why didn't they go abroad, such as President Karzai, the ex-president?
Well, I mean, it's a personal choice, right? Nobody wants to leave their country. It's difficult. I'm sure most of us who are now refugees or who have lived abroad, can relate to that. But most of us, I think, have been given the options of either living with your country or in your country, or living with your principles and your beliefs. That is the option that's presented, to Afghans at the moment. I think we have to respect individual decisions, whether that is of the former presidents or other politicians. But if you're in Afghanistan today, you are, you have to listen to what the Taliban say. And I think President Karzai and other leaders in Afghanistan, they have to respect very strict rules.
I think you're right. Shall we move to women now for a little time? And I could address you as a panelist more than a journalist here, because you're dealing with the situation in Afghanistan and the lack of freedom of women to work. But in the beginning, there were lots of protests, and international journalists broadcasted the protests in the streets of Kabul and also to a certain extent elsewhere. But now it seems to be less and less and less. But you have people on the ground, so what is their impression from the Amu freelancers and stringers you have in Afghanistan? What is their impression about the women now? I mean, we know in Europe people are hunger striking. Women are hunger striking against what's happening now. And there are actions in many countries, but inside it seems to be less.
I would, see it this way, Elizabeth. If there is one Afghan woman protesting in Kabul, that equals to 1,000 women protesting somewhere else. And that represents, their resilience and courage. And I think we have seen enough of, Afghan women coming to the streets and protesting in the past 2 years, that a lot of us were surprised, and people were saying, "Who are these women?" And that is profoundly the Afghanistan of today. So the Taliban are very strict about it, and they are going after them, after their families. They're beaten, they are traced, but I don't think it has stopped them. We get content quite frequently that that Taliban go after them, as well as that they continue protesting, whether under roofs or in small groups. So I don't think it has stopped, but it has been severely suppressed.
Liv, you have to cope with an organization with projects in 14 countries, you said. No, provinces, sorry. And at one stage there was a decree that women should no longer work for NGOs, for example. How do you cope with that?
Yes, I think that is similar to how we cope with almost everything. Trying to negotiate somehow for exemptions. That is the everyday work of my colleagues. Fortunately, the health sector so far is exempted from this ban on women working for NGOs. So that means that we are operating our health education for women. I guess that is the only school. It's not only the only education opportunity for women now, but it's one of very, very few. And luckily, also with the support from Norway, we have been able to expand, and we'll be enroll more than 200 more young women over the next few months. So that is really, really good. But and we also have female leaders for our regional offices. One of them are able to come to office a few times a week for some hours, and the other one, she has to work from home. So, but from our side, we are committed to never to replace a woman with a man, and to facilitate in any way that we can, that they can be working from home, and to negotiate often on an individual level for access to work and access to travel to projects. So it's time consuming, and it's not a good way in any case, but still so far we are somehow managing.
Let's turn to journalism now. After all, you're a journalist first and foremost. And you mentioned working from home, and I happen to learn that journalists in Afghanistan who are female, they also work from home now, mostly, because that is the safe way with the digital possibilities that are offered now. So please now, what do you know about journalism now, and what do you know about the arrests that we recently read about in Kabul and elsewhere of journalists, also from your station, I believe, and from other outlets?
The Reporters Without Borders has said that there is no female journalists in 17 provinces of the country. And the same organization has said that 85% of all female journalists have lost their jobs or forced to leave their jobs for political and economic reasons. So that is really, really depressing. But at the same time, Afghanistan is still one of the countries that I think over 1,000 journalists graduate from journalism school every year. And that is an extra addition to the workforce, which is unfortunately largely unemployed. The male journalists, I think a lot of major newsrooms in the country have reduced their size quite significantly. And freelance journalism and those who work for many outlets overseas and international media organizations, I think have increased quite dramatically, particularly when the Taliban are not allowing now foreign journalists to visit the country as well. So foreign journalists are, for instance, for the second anniversary of the fall of Kabul, the Taliban did not allow major international journalists to visit the country. So they rely again on local journalists. I think the women journalists, as I said, under immense pressure, but male journalists, the list of issues that they can focus on, and work on, is increasing. But from an employment point of view, I think this is really an industry that's suffering a lot.
But about the arrests, I mean, the way in which people are arrested, and then many of them are let loose again after, let's say, a week or two, and some after a year, as we know one person, Kadri from Herat. But how come they are sometimes released, and how come they are not speaking about their experiences after they are released?
So the Taliban's strategy is one of intimidation rather than elimination as at this stage for journalists, and they try to basically make sure that they either work on the topics that they want, or they stop working for international outlets. For instance, I give you an example in Kunduz. So in Kunduz, all local journalists have a WhatsApp group with the Taliban's intelligence person. And then every single journalist in the province, before filing a story, they pitch their story idea to the Taliban operative. And then once he approves, then they go after their stories. So that is the level of censorship at a local level. At national level, again. So that's why I think, because there is so much content coming out of Afghanistan, because there are so many journalists out there, and the number of exiled media has increased in the past 2 years. So that is a cause of paranoia for the current rulers of Afghanistan. They think, how on earth this can happen. So there is a crackdown. They say they've waged war on journalists and women. So they have arrested so many people, and against certain guarantees that they no longer work for others, particularly foreign-based media outlets, and then they're let go. And unfortunately, most of them, end up leaving the country, which is again affecting Afghanistan's human resources, particularly in our field.
Yes, and if they leave the country but still want to work as journalists, they would have to omit their byline, I guess, because they would have family inside the country who would be threatened by the authorities. No?
Depends. I mean, it's a personal choice. Those journalists who work for us, I mean, some of them want to be bylined. Most of them want to work anonymously. At the end of the day, it's a choice of an adult journalist. But yes, the profession is becoming very, very dangerous and risky.
You somehow talked about killing of stories as the Kunduz example. I've heard other examples when we interviewed some journalists working on the ground after the Taliban takeover for a report, that one thing is that they file a story, they make a story, but then they have to get it verified by the authorities. I mean, they cannot file a story without also contacting the authorities, which means then, on the other hand, that the authorities sometimes make themselves unavailable to journalists. There's a lot of critique in the press, as I've seen in the media, about lack of access to information or access to the authorities. So isn't that a kind of very subtle, or well, maybe not so very subtle, but a little bit subtle way of killing stories?
Yes. I mean, they don't believe in the fact that there has to be checks and balance in this society, so why they should feel accountable to a journalist, while they see journalists and journalism and media as a tool for their narrative to be promoted. So we are not having a sort of a tactical issue here. We're having a deep political and strategic problem, which defines the entire Taliban media relationship. I don't think. I mean, there are certain Taliban leaders or individuals who are relatively more media friendly, but I think that is also becoming a taboo.
We're working towards the end here now before we allow also the audience, but a question about strategy. We've observed that there are media models now working as the hybrid model, where you have the leadership abroad and an editorial office here and there, and then you have people on the ground who are mostly doing this in a very secretive way, because otherwise they would be at great risk. But how is your strategy to continue, and how do you protect your people inside?
We have our vision is that journalism should remain journalism, not activism, not politics. And we should try to, whenever we file stories, we should follow a strict universal ethics of journalism. And being abroad gives you the freedom to pursue whatever story you want, but it doesn't give you the freedom to say whatever you want. So you have to be fact-checked yourself. I think, for us, being operating from abroad, we are making sure that we're accountable to our own profession, to our own ethics, to our own code of conduct. But at the same time, I think working with journalists in the country in a hybrid model, as you described, we believe it is also helping that we remain in touch with the country that we report on. So it's not just a few of us overseas analyzing the situation with no basis every day. And we have so many examples of exile media. I actually attended a conference in Hamburg yesterday where we were talking about it. That is, what is the relationship between journalism and activism? What can we learn from 44 years of Iranian exiled media? Is journalism abroad really, the mandate is really regime change? So these are, I think questions for us in the exile community. But I think what we know is that yes, politics changed, yes, government changed, but not our ethics. Not our code of conduct. So we strictly follow that.
Thank you. We now open for questions from the audience. I have to remind you that we're asking for questions and not mini speeches. A kind reminder. So raise your hands, please. And Jenny is here with the microphone that she can distribute around, or can you?
I think they need to come forward.
Oh yeah, fine. So if you have questions to ask, then raise your hands and come forward and also say your names. Farid Ahmadi, please. Hold your microphone close so that it can be recorded.
My name is Farida Ahmadi. I'm social anthropologist and writer. And I come just to say hello to Lotfullah, because he is a brilliant journalist, and all Afghan is proud of you. You gave optimism to Afghan people at this moment who $1 million used to divide Afghan people now. This is the reality of our Afghanistan. And come to live, and my friend Elizabeth Aida, we know each other, and you know very well. You are a very good analyst of Afghanistan. You write the book that never peace come to Afghanistan. You know a lot. And I would like that we must, and you must be honest. When you talk in Afghanistan, you are a part of problem. And you, dear Aida, also, this is, you not laugh like that. The Afghanistan, I speak because my suffering is this.
Can I remember that you have to ask a question, please?
Yeah, my question is, can you please, it is possible for you to be a part of Afghanistan level, that we work together, not separated. You think Taliban come from Mars? And what is your activity during this time? Can you please tell me how the fundamentalist, your Mujahideen friend come from? And to make something in Afghanistan, we must be honest, and we must work together. This is the way that we can do something in Afghanistan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would like a question, answer.
I would like you to address a question mainly to the speaker, but because this is a debate we've had for ages. But let us wait with the answers and have some more questions, and then we can. Yeah, I saw one more. Yes, Afshin Ismaili.
Yeah. My name is Afshin Ismaili. I'm a journalist from Norwegian newspaper Aftenposten. Thank you for your speech. It was really, we learned a lot. I have just a question regarding the vision of Taliban. You mentioned that they don't have a vision. But what I think is like, maybe it's not a question, but I think they have a vision. We should not belittle the Taliban. They know a lot. They have a lot of experience. And as you mentioned, Iran as an example as well. Because what we see now is like regarding the woman cannot go to school. Because Iranian government have seen it that woman that they let them to go to school now is a kind of torn in their shoes. And Taliban knows that very well. And this is a vision, I think. They have a vision, they know everything very well. And they have as well examples like Saudi, like the Gulf countries. This is a good example for Taliban. So I think this is a vision of Taliban for the future. And to belittling them is maybe wrong.
And that was the question?
Yeah, I think I comment, I don't know, it's a question.
Thank you. Shall we have one more and then we will answer? Yeah, I see two. I think you were first in the row 3 here. And then there will be and please also present your name. Can you try to pass your friends there and come out?
I have a question as a
Right, okay.
My name is Yahya. I'm the older brother of Lotfullah, but my friend says that I look younger than him. Well, I can ask my question at home as well, but...
Yeah, come to the question,
exactly.
Please. Question.
Yes, when the Afghanistan, when the Taliban take over the rule in Afghanistan on 21st of August, 15th of August 2021, my Norwegian Muslim friends congratulated me. They say that finally the Islamic Afghanistan became an Islamic country, and they were happy for that. While I was sitting and I was crying about the situation in Afghanistan. Do you think that Taliban are really representing Islam, a real Islam, which shows a real picture of my Muslim friends who are living in Norway?
Yes, and should we take, well, I don't know who was first of the two of you, but you're in a more comfortable position there. So we'll take this and we make note of the questions and we will answer. Primarily our speaker will answer.
Salam, Rola Musavi, a student in Oslo Met and living in Oslo. First of all, welcome, Lotfullah. Hope you enjoy here in Oslo. I have a question in 2 sections. If the Taliban remains in power, do you think the independent journalists and independent media stay in Afghanistan or leave? If they stays, and the second question, if they stays, on one side there are Taliban's roles, and on the other side it is media responsibility and duty to broadcast the truths and facts. What do you think about it? Thank you.
Thank you. And then one more question, and then we'll have another round of questions after that. So, yes. Replik, please, this is not the student association. Can we try to make this orderly? There was one more in the fourth row, yes. And then we will have another round after the answers. And then, of course, you will be part of that.
Hi, Lotfullah, glad to see you again. My name is Hasib. I'm part of the generation that Lotfullah explained, the 20 years. I studied in the US, came back to Afghanistan, very hopeful. But our ideologies right now, I believe, with a certain group in Afghanistan in Panjshir, that the only way to battle with the Taliban is through resistance, armed resistance. I'm pretty sure a lot of other people had their versions of how to negotiate with the Taliban, but throughout our history, we believe that, constantly, this negotiations, these things that has happened before, what it has brought into Afghanistan, we know, we have experienced it. Could be wrong, but this is at least our vision. My question to the audience is that, do you think that is a feasible solution? And if yes or no, what could we do better in terms of engagement and to be able to bring everyone together to fight with this cancer? That's it.
Thanks a lot. I think we'll primarily prioritize answers from our speaker, because that was the intention of this meeting, and then if there are certain issues, we will address them afterwards. Would you like to start with the armed resistance and then go on to independent media and the real Islam, etc.? I mean, there are several issues here that you can address.
Thank you. For me, the Taliban represent a certain rural-based Islamic ideology that comes predominantly from the refugee camps in Pakistan, compounded with very vague tribal traditions that is often more tradition than religious. I think that is who the Taliban are. I don't look at them as really as religious scholars. It's really difficult to come to that conclusion. So a mixture of tribalism, a mixture of very sort of narrow version of what Islam says. Which is a very fundamental view. On journalists, independent journalists in Afghanistan, whether leaving the country or not, I don't think that there is free media in Afghanistan. I mean, I don't think that there is. Yes, there are journalists. Yes, there are great journalists. Yes, there are great media outlets in the country. They have to be supported and they have to be admired for what they do. But we can't categorize the current situation in Afghanistan, the media in the country, as free. I mean, we have to be honest with ourselves. On the Taliban's ability or capacity for reconciliation, my friend, I mean, that has proven to be wrong, at least in Doha. The Doha deal was the perfect opportunity for the Taliban to reconcile with the rest of the society, and that proved to be quite difficult for them to accommodate. So, what kind of reactions and consequences that winner-take-all approach might have, I think is out there. Could be a civil war. If you're asking whether a civil war is a solution, I don't think so. I don't think war is a solution. But standing up against the Taliban in whatever way people think is right to defend their integrity, their dignity, their rights, I think it's a choice of the people. It is difficult for us to say what's right and what's wrong for people who go through so much. I know in places like Panjshir, there are thousands of armed Taliban fighters policing every single valley. Yes, it is politically incorrect maybe in certain circles to talk about it, but that is a reality. And no single journalist is allowed to visit Panjshir, for instance. Places like Andarab. There are 30,000 plus prisoners in jail, in Taliban jails today. Last time we checked, that after the takeover, all prisoners were let go. So who are these 30,000 people? I mean, right? So they must come from somewhere. So these are all. These people, may have a different view, which has to be, I think, at least listened or if not understood.
Yes, Liv, do you want to address some of the questions raised?
No, I don't think so.
No. There is a certain debate that Farida raised that I think we can continue after Lotfullah has left. But he's here now for another half hour to our disposal, so I think we should actually concentrate on questions for him. But I am allowed to say one sentence, is that I think every person who has been on the international level inside Afghanistan needs to be self-reflective about what they have done. And that debate will continue. As we say about history, we talked about it some other day, Kai, at another occasion. It could take 50 years of assessment before we really can understand, for example, what did the Soviet invasion mean, what did the US interference mean, and so on and so forth. This debate will continue till after we are under earth, I believe, some of us here at least. Next round of questions. Yes, I think my friend over there in the white blouse, you were first. And come forward, please. And then it's Hasina. No. We are broadcasting this. There is a streaming going on. So if you want to be live streamed, please use the microphone over here. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Huda Khamosh.
Right.
I'm a journalist and activist from Afghanistan. I have a question for Lotfullah. My question is very important because I think Afghanistan needs young people look you. Or you think about becoming president? Yeah.
That was your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Fine.
It's very good question, I think, because Afghanistan needs, women need, people need, and work need. I think it is Afghanistan's now very bad. Not a woman, and all people, and I think Afghanistan's need. Look, Lotfullah. Tusen tack.
Khuda was one who challenged severely the Taliban when they visited Norway with a poster of the imprisoned women in Kabul at the time. And so I guess you would volunteer to join his cabinet, right? Hasina Shirzad, you're next, yeah.
Thank you. I'm really happy Huda brought up the question of being president, because this question follows up exactly to that. So from the beginning of what I heard in your speech, I did hear several times there are no quick fixes. And then so many other points about women, journalists, and a lot of updates. And of course, at the end, I heard that people can choose whether they choose to fight or have resistance through any means they do. But what I'm missing here, or I would like to at least go today home with, is a solution, a hope, which I could not find in all of these conversations. And since you are to be president, this is the right time to ask this. So my question is that what would be your version of no quick fixes and a step-by-step future for Afghanistan and perhaps for this generation? And I also wanted to raise another point, which I think Farida was trying to convey, the frustration of Afghans for the unaccountability of international community. I didn't hear about that, and I would like to hear from you what do you think about this point. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Kai Eide, my distant cousin, not.
Finally, she admits. At least something historic has happened here today. The first candidate for the next presidential election has been announced. We don't know when they will be, and hopefully you will still be young when they take place. You mentioned something to me in the car that intrigued me a bit. You're not only broadcasting news, you're broadcasting a lot of other things. Could you say something about that and how people respond to what you produce?
Thank you. I see one more hand. I see two more hands. So we'll take two more questions in this round. The gentleman with glasses, can you come forward, please? And then afterwards, the woman in the last row, you can make yourself ready so that it will be a smooth transition.
Jan Presvik. My experience from Afghanistan is older than most of you. 50 years soon, I think. I was there, traveling around in an old car, tenting along the rivers, fishing trout in the rivers. I've been to Panjshir, as high as you can come without climbing, eating with the maidens with the goats. Yeah. So, but let's talk about something else. Now, Afghanistanis, they're the poor people. Half of them are starving, but it's a rich country. And we hear about all industrial projects. Shall we support the industrial projects or shall we not? Supporting industrial project, is that support to Taliban or what is it?
Thank you. And then over to the last person asking question in this round.
Thank you. I am Vips or Vibeke Van. I am from Agder SV. I come up here very often to Oslo, and I'm one of the ones outside of the foreign ministry screaming with my signs with Hoda and Mina. I just had dinner with Mina. I do all of these things as an activist, as political. I have worked politically in my area of the country for Afghanistan. I've been in Sweden for Afghanistan, and so I do all these things, and my friends always ask me, why are you doing it? And I don't always know. It's just something I have to do because not a lot of people looking like me do this. But my question is, what should we do? In your opinion, what should I do? I know what the Afghans should do, and I always tell them when I meet them what I think. They should be together, they should make a plan. But what should I, looking as me, being me, what should I do to help?
Thank you.
That is my question.
Great. I think, well, since this is the last round, Peter Bauk, you came in late, but he's a veteran of Afghanistan. But you don't have to tell about your 70s, just ask a question.
I was there 53 years ago, but
exactly.
Nothing more about that. No, thank you for a very, very interesting speech, and your conclusions as to what now. But you also mentioned briefly that the Taliban had some successes when it came to the diplomatic efforts in the region. Could you say something more about that? Because, conflict with Iran, conflicts on the border in the north, and the internal conflicts in Pakistan. But could you say something about that? Because you hinted into in at least the economic area that there were some positive steps that the Taliban have achieved.
Thank you. That is a big round for you to answer. I will try to remind you if you don't remember all the questions, but I'm sure you take notes as a good journalist and a president-to-be. Please.
Although, John, I would be a very happy spokesperson for the first female president of Afghanistan.
Applause.
I think I'll start with the question of what I can do as a friend of Afghanistan. Afghanistan is facing a very fundamental challenge in the international community right now, which is abandonment again. Don't let it happen. We need your voice. We need your presence. And the presence of everyone whose heart has been touched by that country, which I'm sure it's the case, you know, of you. And I interact with veterans of Afghanistan. Just in the case of the U.S., 1 million tours of U.S. servicemen and women in that country. Their families, their friends, their loved ones. So we are talking about an enormous number of people who have personal and emotional connection with that country. I think because of the inconvenience of politics, we should not let that country to be forgotten, and we need you for that. Solution, oh my God.
Exactly.
I thought I was advocating for no quick fix, so that means I don't have a solution. But let's work for one. How a solution would look like, I might probably try to elaborate. I think it has to be consulted. It has to be consultative. It has to. We have to develop a roadmap that can include all segments of the society, where we know where the goalposts are, and where do we get from point 1 to point 2. And for that, I think we need to be open to discuss everything. I once studied the Colombian peace process, and this was in 2019. And one thing that they had was the Truth Commission, which I was very, very interested. And they believed that reconciliation without a healing process is impossible. So yes, we can make deals. Yes, we can make arrangements. Yes, we can agree on how to distribute power. But if we really don't share our griefs, our sorrows, our pain, and do not understand each other, and do not forgive each other, I really feel the pain in your words that you said. So that we need platforms like that. So in order to get to that solution that you're asking, I know that we have to do these things. And for that, I think we have to see where the expertise are, what kind of, because the solution in today's Afghanistan is all about how you distribute power. How you, what kind of political system you want. These are, trust me, these are political statements. These are not solutions. People advocating for a central system, presidential, parliamentary, federal, these are not very well thought through in my view. So that is a very, very tough question and challenge for all of us. Accountability of the international community, or lack of accountability, if you mean that there is a degree of silence, I agree with you, because we have lost our political relevance, and we have to regain that. And that's where our friends can help, and people like her. So we have to turn Afghanistan. We have to make sure Afghanistan becomes politically relevant again.
Should I say what I meant?
Please.
Yeah, I actually meant the part that what happened in Afghanistan is not only our fault. it was a joint responsibility from the world and international community, which was in Afghanistan and Afghans,
right?
Which we didn't get so much on the other part of international.
But yes, I think that is a question that the German Parliament is trying to understand. And I testified there a few months ago, and then they were asking, how come Germany didn't see? We see that Congress is asking questions. They're asking certain individuals in the Biden administration to come and testify. So there are people who ask the same questions. But you're right that this was a collective failure. And I think we need more answers.
We had a report in Norway as well, actually, quite a few years back, the Godal report. So yes,
I'm
questions
very happy
are being
to
asked.
hear that.
Yeah.
Kai, thank you for your continued interest in our work. Yes, we as a TV channel, although as journalists trying to be serious and do all those interviews, we love that. But we thought, look, the TV channel should address the vacuum created in the country, and that is music, and that is soap opera, and that is women's content, and that is children's content, and that is basically content that celebrates Nowruz, celebrates our culture, our diversity. So from 6 hours of content that we produce every single day, only 2 hours is news and current affairs. So 4 hours is focused beyond news, and I hope we're able to expand that. Taliban successes. Well, they have succeeded to remain in power for 2 years. That is a fact. They have succeeded to collect money, revenue. That is a success. How are they spending? We can talk about that. Where is the Taliban budget? We can talk about that. And how much of it is really being spent on defense and security? We can talk about that. But I think the Taliban have certainly been very proactive in the way they collect taxes. And with Afghanistan's northern neighbors in Central Asia, I think there is more sort of defined relationship and more clarity. Your country's special representative was in Central Asia just past week. Your country's special representative for Afghanistan was in Central Asia. And then there is a lot happening, let's say between Uzbekistan and Taliban on trade and others. So these are certain steps that the Taliban have put forward. On corruption, I think that is very, very political to comment, but we hear from people who say that there is less corruption, but at the same time we hear that it costs you more than $1,000 to get a passport. So I think that needs a little more investigation.
Industry was mentioned. Do you want to add something on that from Örjan here? He asked about should one engage in industry, would that be supportive of the Taliban? I mean, should the foreign or the international community engage in industry? China does it, we know that. But others?
There was a delegation of American Chamber of Commerce who visited Kabul last week. And they talked about minerals. And the Taliban have awarded contracts to British, Turkish, Iranian, and Chinese companies in the past month, and I think engagement that benefits the people of Afghanistan, particularly addressing the humanitarian crisis, is a must. But one has also need to see whether that balance of Taliban manipulation or influence over that engagement is that has to be assessed. So it's a case-by-case study, I would say. In maybe some areas, engagement with the people within the country, might benefit the people more and the Taliban less. But there is no way that the Taliban won't benefit from the money going to the country, or projects being implemented, or aid being delivered. That is what it is.
You did address the armed struggle question, or?
I think I tried to.
Yeah.
Yes, I tried to, but again, this is as a journalist, I can't advocate for war, right? As a victim of war, I can't advocate for war. One of the first memories of my life is that when an RPG landed at our house in Kabul, and then we fled the city, and I still live with that trauma. And this is, I don't want any Afghan kid to see that. But as I said, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't see the cause of people's resistance. I mean, that is totally another thing. Whether it is women's resistance, whether that is resistance from journalists, or certain people who decide to take up arms. There is no black and white answer for that.
Lee, would you try to have a final word about what did we learn from this experience and exchange up here now?
I had hoped actually to speak a bit more about hope, Elizabeth.
That is always my question, so that's fine.
So I think it's, for now, quite difficult to see what hope there is, at least here, from out of the country. But I would say that we must not forget all those teachers, nurses, I think it's journalists, everyone that is actually still in the country, trying to cope and trying to make a difference, trying to offer services and trying to make it the best they can out of the situation. And the hope lies there, that the people will, at one time, they will find ways to cope and find a way forward. I'm concerned that it might be will be worse before it gets better, but I think we will never give up hope that it will get better and that there will actually be solutions for a sustainable peace in Afghanistan.
And then I'll address the same question to you, but before I say that, there is a certain saying among us who have visited Afghanistan so many times and who really somehow love this country. We call it SARS, and you might think of that as a virus, but it's Severe Afghanistan Return Syndrome. And but your hope, where would you place your hopes?
I think in our office in DC, we have beautifully calligraphed names of all fallen journalists in order to remind us every day that there is a cause for what we do. Hope is very grim. Afghanistan, the Afghan people, is probably the most hopeless people in the world right now. Those of us who are overseas, our confidence is shattered, our self-confidence is shattered. Those people who are back home, I mean, they are hopeless. I don't want to be over optimistic. I know this is a tough conversation. I'm sorry that we're having this, but for me, the future looks very grim at this situation. Why should we stick to what we do? That is very clear for me. because I fundamentally believe that's why I focused my talks primarily on the people. And that is a different people. Trust me that in my family, when we voted in the past elections, we had strong differences, and I guess we voted for different candidates. And that, for me, that is a very personal experience of how the country really evolved. So that is, I mean, the people deserve our hard work, deserve our commitment, and because also it's personal. I mean, we have our entire political careers or our life ahead of us. We can't just wait and see how destiny will play with it. There must be some ownership, and for me that is what drives me. And if you think that gives some people some hope, it might. But I can't really be so hopeful that in the next months or years, a magic will happen, and I don't see signs of it.
Thank you. Thank you, Lotfullah Najafizada. There will be a sign of appreciation from Kai Eide, member of the Afghanistan subcommittee of Norwegian PEN. And please give a big hand to Lotfullah, who has a very heavy program, but still came here.
Thank you, Lotfullah. There's certain keywords that you have been repeating, and one has been ownership. Ownership. And if you look at, I'm thinking at also the Balkan wars, why are the countries still not together? It's because the peace process was imposed. There was no local ownership. So ownership is the primary requirement, I think, for success. We all have our hearts in Afghanistan, as you know. And so you can be sure that we will remain engaged. And thank you very much for seeing to it that we remain informed. It has been a fantastic 2 hours with you. And I wish you a safe journey onwards to Sweden and further down through Europe during the week. Thank you again. And then I have 2 small books for you. The one is from a Kurdish writer who has been in prison in Turkey for 28 years. Ian Sami Chomak. And the other from an Iranian city of refuge writer. It is in Persian and Norwegian, and you can choose whatever language you would read. Thank you again for coming. And thank you to these brilliant moderators.